So I'm sitting inside a Rolls Royce with Jerry Orbach. So early on in my film car career, and this was actually before I had creative film cars, I was on an episode of Law and Order. I'd come to New York originally to be an actor or director or something like that. And the film car thing kind of seemed like an entrance into it. So we were hired to do this shoot, and it was like a Rolls Royce and a couple of things. And it was in a garage. And anybody who's seen Law and Order, it's the same episode over and over and over again of inane, vague questions, really specific answers from people who shouldn't be that specific, and then somebody goes to jail. My job was just to bring the cars and make sure they were okay. They were going to do multiple shoots around the neighborhood, and this is kind of how they shot in New York, is they would get multiple locations within about 3 blocks, and they would shoot the whole episode and knock them out, because they cranked these things out. And they had gotten this little museum, and then they had gotten another shop, and then they had us at this little garage. And it was a cold, rainy New York that day, and they needed a filler. So I got to be on camera, and every actor in New York eventually gets on Law and Order somehow. And this was my big break. I was going to be like mechanic's assistant, and they wanted me to hold a clipboard behind the mechanic while he's being interviewed. And at this time, it was early 2000s, and it was Jerry Orbach, who's an absolute legend. You know, a lot of people know him from the show, but he was Mr. Broadway. I mean, he was the leading man in the late 60s and 70s, and just a tremendous person. I was kind of like, I get to meet Jerry Orbach. So we do the shoot, and they have an actor who apparently has been on it a couple of times be the mechanic who gets to talk to Jerry Orbach. And I'm just standing back there with my clipboard. And he's got one line, and it's one of those typical answers they have on Law and Order. Like, he goes, "Do you remember a guy about 3 weeks ago? He had a black jacket." And the guy's like, "Black jacket? Yeah, I remember a black jacket. Yeah, he was about 5'7". He had 3 kids, and he was into Baroque music." And and he lists off all this crazy evidence. And the guy had one line, and he couldn't get it out. And it's cold and it's windy, and the crew's just like, it's one line. So they're like, "Oh, let's take a break." So I said the line out of a joke. I just said the whole line because I'd heard it a bunch of times. And they're like, "Give him the clipboard." I'm like, "What?" Like, "Give the other guy the clipboard. You do the line." I'm like, "I'm acting in Law and Order. I'm going to talk to Jerry Orbach." So and the guy's like, "What?" Like, this, I guess you don't get paid if you don't talk, right? So I got to say, I don't remember what the line was. It was something really inane. And I said something, and they're like, "Okay, let's take a break." And they're going to reset up the angles and the lights and the cameras or whatever. So we go inside, and Jerry Orbach's cold. I mean, he's late 60s at this point, and I didn't know at the time, dying of cancer. But you would never have known. The guy was an amazing professional. He's like, "I'm cold." And we're like, "Well, here, hop in the Rolls Royce." So the car, if I remember correctly, and I usually do, not all the time, but I usually remember what the car is. It was a 1966 Rolls Royce Silver Cloud 3, and it was a Park Ward bodied car. It was a drop top coupe, and it was triple black. So black body, black interior, black top. Oh, I mean, really, one of the most iconic Rollses of all time. If you need to make a statement, that's the car to do it in. We put him inside, and I get in the driver's side because I'm supposed to take care of the cars. So I'm sitting inside a Rolls Royce with Jerry Orbach. And I'm like, what do you talk to Jerry Orbach about, right? And I'm sure he's gotten all the fan questions. And so I was like, trying to be super casual, like, "Yeah. So how's it going, Jerry? Good things. And he is the nicest guy. And he instantly wants to switch the conversation to cars, because I'm a car guy. So he lays into this story, which I think is fantastic. He starts telling me that because he was a smoker for years, And you'll see him in a lot of old things. I mean, he was the dad in Dirty Dancing, right? He smoked for decades. And the Rolls Royce, being a 60s car, had the vent windows. And for people who are young, cars used to have vent windows in the front. And you'd have your main window and a little vent window at the front that used to open. And the purpose of that was you could turn the vent window forward and get more air to come in, because a lot of cars didn't have air conditioning back in the day. It was a way of shoving more air in without having to roll the window all the way down and have a lot of buffeting and things going on. But his main function for it was to flick his ash out the window. And he was perturbed that they started building cars without the vent window. And I had to look this up. The last cars built with a vent window was in 1996, and it was a Ford F-150 and the G-Series Chevy vans. Those were the last of their kind with the opening vent window. So he said, and I kid you not, that he signed some paperwork and he went and petitioned to Congress to have them put vent windows back in cars, because he thought this was an important thing, that it was safety. It was about his convenience, that cars should have vent windows. So Jerry Orbach, I can just see him like sitting in front of like, Senator, I believe this is a crime against the American people. You can imagine doing it, right? Like, and we should put vent windows back into cars. And the senator being like, you're right. You're absolutely right, Mr. Orbach. And we had this great chat, but he was passionate about smoking in cars. And he's like, I don't smoke anymore. I'm like, obviously, since if you got cancer, you're hopefully not going to be smoking. But he was a big proponent of the vent window. And like, that was our kind of a conversation. And then they're like, okay, back to it. And doors open and we go back outside and do my line. And they move on. And he passed away in 2004, shortly afterwards. And there were posters everywhere in New York for a long time of Jerry Orbach saying like he gave his heart to the theater, but he gave his eyes to two New Yorkers. And he donated his eyes. And John Mulaney, the comedian, has a fantastic bit about Jerry Orbach's eyes, where he imagines two people getting their eyes. And I won't do the disservice of trying to do his bit, but the idea is that two people like meet in a rom-com kind of way, and they look at each other, and they both have Jerry Orbach's eyes. And like my version of that is like, you have two guys have Jerry Orbach's eyes, and for some weird reason, you know, they both get in the same car at the same time, and they both go, this car needs vent windows.
5 years ago, the first sponsor we ever had here on the VINwiki channel was Caffeine and Octane. Now, they're our local Atlanta Cars and Coffee meetup that I've been going to for 15 or so years now, but it is now the largest monthly recurring automotive gathering on Earth. Now, you'll also recognize Caffeine and Octane from their television show, and the next season of that airs very soon on Motor Trend. In their quest for further automotive world domination, they just bought the legendary Lanier Motor Speedway, which is across the street from Road Atlanta. So throughout the next year, we're going to have a lot of amazing events there that you'll be invited to join. But the coolest project they've deployed lately is called HighOctane.tv, and it's a free streaming network that you can access from any smart TV, Roku, Fire Stick, smartphone, or a computer, and it'll give you access to a ton of programming, including all 5 seasons of their show, some content from creators we love like David Patterson, That Dude in Blue, and a ton more. Soon there will be some content from VINwiki on there as well. So visit the link in the description below to learn more about the amazing world of Caffeine and Octane.